for the world anew.
Welcome to Muffin Talk.
Shines a light to create.
Today I've invited Christina Reymer to a Zoom recording for broadcast. Christina, a warm welcome and hi to my radio program.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's really good to be here. Thank you, Viate.
And thank you for joining us today, Christina. Christina Reymer is from the Waikato in New Zealand, and she's one of the national coordinators of Be the Change in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I recorded an interview with her in September 2022, just before the Suffrage Day. The interview is still available on our website and on our YouTube channel. If you haven't heard it or want to hear it again, please check out www.studyjoy.nz and search for Christina. Christina, before we talk about some updates from your work as coordinator of Be the Change, can you give us a brief explanation again about what Be the Change is?
Be the Change is a group that's been going for about 5 years now. We are mostly women who have a Catholic connection, although we're not exclusively Catholic, and looking for gender equality in the Catholic Church, essentially. So women who have felt disenfranchised, marginalised, or just don't accept the second-rate status that women have been relegated to as part of the Catholic Church. So I guess that's basically our mission is rather than waiting for equality and waiting for recognition and waiting for a call to ministry or leadership or whatever it might be, we are simply asserting the right to be the change, to live as Catholic women how we want to.
You just mentioned the term gender. You didn't say the equality men and women, but you said gender. Is that broader than just women and men?
It is, because it does include the full spectrum of gender, of LGBTQI, trans, and so on. And they are also people who are marginalised because of their sexuality. We because we are women, but they also because of their sexuality in various ways. So it's definitely, it is broader than just. And we aren't exclusively women either. There are some male members, and our partners are very much partnered, many of them male. And so, yeah, it's certainly broader.
And this is not just New Zealand, it's also wider in the world, or are there different names for different work that's similar in a way?
As we have become more and more active in the whole reform movement, if you like, we've discovered that there are actually hundreds of organisations globally that go by different names, who are like ourselves, have just grown organically from their own local situation, and so they've got their own names. So there's We Are Church, which is there's We Are Church Ireland, We Are Church Germany, We Are Church Austria, France or UK. There is Catholic Reform Movement. In Australia alone, there are up to 20 organisations that I know of that are basically part of the Reform Movement, and as such I've been asked to be a representative for Be the Change on the Australasian Coalition for Catholic Church Reform, which has represented up to 20 organisations. So yeah, Catholics, Reforming Catholics, Inclusive Catholics, Rainbow Catholics, Women's Ordination Conference, you name it. This goes on and on.
Sounds like a vast network, and a lot of people are really concerned about doing something, as you say, and they don't want to wait until something is happening by itself. So they are saying we are the change. We are not waiting for the change.
And it's very much spirit-driven. You know, we feel we are called by the Holy Spirit, who is calling us to act as who we are, as by virtue of our baptism. We believe in one baptism for all, and we pray that in the Creed. We believe in one baptism. There's not one baptism for male and one baptism for female, or one baptism for clergy and hierarchy and one baptism for lay people. No, there is one baptism. And we're all created equally in the image of God. And yet, when you go drill down a little bit deeper, we discover that the reality in the church is not that at all. So it's like, oh no, sorry, you can't be called to, you can't have a calling to this or that ministry because you are female or you are whatever, so, or you are lay and you are this. So you get, it's hierarchical.
I think
hierarchy.
Last time in the interview, you said something really nice. What I liked, you said, in a way, it's if you empower everybody equally, that takes some of the burden of selected people who have to do everything and have to be specialists for everything. If you work together as teams and on the same level, I think that what you said would help the church and would help include everybody.
That's precisely it. I mean, not only is it a denial of our rights as human beings to be able to live full life in our in the church, in our spiritual as well as material and liturgical ways, the church itself denies itself the fruits of the contribution of half of its population to be able to live fully as human beings, more than half, in fact, when you look at the broader spectrum of the discrimination in marginalised groups. So, we as a church globally are denying ourselves the full life of what we could be and what God is calling us to.
Christina, last time when we talked, that was September 2022, around the time, I think it was just before the Suffrage Day, and you were talking about a project that you had, or an initiative called Pink Shoes to the Vatican. How did it go, and what was it about again?
It was the brainchild of one of our members, and it's just grown since then. It's basically is a campaign for gender equality in the Catholic Church. And what we did was we asked women to send in their worn out shoes with their stories, which we typed up onto little pink cards and attached them. And these shoes we used to line the streets from, initially in Auckland, from the Women's Suffrage Place all the way down Queen Street and up Wyndham Street to the steps of the Catholic Cathedral, where the doors of the church are still effectively closed to us. And so it was, we called it an art installation, and invited people to just read and look and take a note of women's stories. And then as people took an interest, and lots of people in the street did, we would strike up a conversation immediately, and they'd say, oh yes, well, I used to go to the Catholic Church, or my family, or they'd say that, well, our church is the same, and I feel the same, or in so many things that, we had great conversations, and there was a lot of support and a lot of interest for it.
Christina, you had worn shoes that you placed there, and you had stories of women that were tagged to it, right?
Yes, they were tied with a pink ribbon to the shoes. So the woman's name would be on it, our first name only. So it would be something like, my shoes, Christina, cradle Catholic, worked her life in dedication, committed life to the church, but still regarded as a second-class citizen. So I will never be Pope, something like that. And we actually had some pink high heel shoes. In fact, they were red shoes. And we know the Pope wears red, but they were high heel shoes, so clearly women's shoes. And someone had put on those ones, the next Pope's shoes, with a little tongue-in-cheek.
Pope Francis wears black shoes now, doesn't he?
Well, perhaps so, but the tradition has been that the Pope wears red shoes. Yes. So yes, but it was the stories that women, and those stories are still actually available with the photographs of it on YouTube. So you can just Google or search on YouTube for Pink Shoes into the Vatican, and you'll see those stories.
Yeah. And I understand that you actually took them to the Vatican.
Well, that's right. Yes, it was so successful, and we were met with very positive response from Bishop Steve Lowe on the steps of the cathedral. Well, a letter read by one of his delegates, his priests, but on the steps of the cathedral, and we felt, wow, this has been so good and it's generated so much interest. We actually have to literally take these shoes to the Vatican. So with a suitcase full of the shoes, my husband and I took them to Rome last October to coincide with the Synod on Synodality, the first session. We weren't actually part of the official synod, but there was a huge unofficial synod called Spirit Unbounded. It was run by people initially from Bruton Branch, but 100 contributors globally to talk on gender equality, on sexuality, on women, on ministry, on liturgy, on decolonisation and in racism in the church, and you name it, the whole spectrum of issues were talked about. And people pre-recorded their presentations, and they were all available still on YouTube and under Spirit Unbounded. And so this Pink Shoes into the Vatican, we made that as a part of that whole witness, I suppose. And it was a wonderful experience of meeting people like-minded and people who challenged as well, globally, from every corner of the globe. And you really had a sense of how big, how broad the Catholic Church is, and the diversity that's there, the cultural, linguistic, and historical diversity, but also the commonalities that we shared as Catholic people, and common concerns.
Christina, tell us about the details. You took a suitcase full of shoes from New Zealand and then
Yes.
took them to the Vatican. How the customs would have looked strange at you. What are you doing with a suitcase full of worn shoes?
There wasn't too much of a problem coming through customs because they really weren't interested. They were not lethal or dangerous or anything like that. It was perhaps a little curious, but nobody asked any questions. So we got to Rome okay, and we trundled them down the street. And the first engagement was that this morning we were there, and the Women's Ordination Conference. So that's a group who, Kate McElwee from the US, but people globally connected to that. We're going to unfurl this huge banner which just said "Ordain Women" on the banks of the Tiber River, which would have the Vatican in the background, and so the image would be there. And they had a permit from the police to be able to stage that event between 8 and 10 and on this particular morning, early October. And so we brought our pink shoes along and we joined with them on that. And so we put the shoes out along the footpath alongside the Tiber as people were walking up and back and forth, mostly up towards the Vatican. And so we had our art installation on the street. And that worked really well until come 10 o'clock, the police just moved in and said, "Excuse me, your permit has expired. You have to remove this now." I said, "Oh, okay then, all right. Well, we'll do it another day." So a couple of days later then, we did attempt to go and find the police and get a permit, but we were sent from pillar to post and walking these hot, dusty streets, and eventually it just wasn't a goer. But we managed to find other ways. We put them in the grounds of the venue where the Casa de la, I can't remember exactly what it was called, near the Vatican where the Spirit Unbounded conference was, and then around the walls. So we had the massive big walls of the Vatican in view with the shoes outside. So that was a powerful image of the shoes. Women from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, America, Canada, they all joined in, Scotland, Ireland, numerous places, and joined in and shared with that whole, sharing their stories and talking to people about it. So it had a powerful impact. And then finally on the last day, I thought I want to get the shoes actually on the main Avenue de Conciliars, which is the one that leads right directly to the Vatican, that is closed to traffic and is just full of people. So we did that, and then we sat in the coffee shop just next, on the street there and watched, and people stopped again, and I went to go and talk to them. And I thought, this is good, we'll get the photos and get the conversations and our last chance at making the statement. But then as soon as there was actually a young man from America who came by with his daughter on his shoulder and his wife walking alongside with a toddler, and he just threw himself into a tirade. He was obviously very anti anything to do with women in the church. And he said, "I know you people, I know what you need to love the church, and you this," and he was very, very angry and verbal. It was verbally abusive. and I couldn't get a word in sideways. Even to just sort of say, well, can you explain to me what you think? Or no, you didn't want to hear anything of what I wanted to say. But of course, it drew the attention of the police, and the next thing, the police are on our case again and said, "You don't have a permit for this." And so we were forced to say, "Oh, yes, but we tried." And no, they didn't want to hear about that either. And so we said, "Okay, we're leaving today anyway." So we just picked up the shoes, and after a bit of consultation and being muffled, they let us go, and we disappeared that evening.
I think it's interesting what you say also with you have like all the spectrum from those who are interested, from those who are appreciative, and those who are very much against it. And
Yes.
And also the fact that you get in touch with people who might be lapsed Catholics or might have challenges, and they read the messages and they get in touch with you. I think that would be a wonderful church survey. It's a church survey that might be a lot more precious than a church survey held in the churches, because then you approach the people who are already in the church. But with your work, you can get the people who are not going to church. And I think that is really important feedback for the church in a positive way, I think, because out of feedback you can learn.
Absolutely. It's amazing how it really just did call forth from people something much deeper. I mean, on the first day, there was a middle-aged woman who was there with her quite elderly but still quite mobile mother. And they were from Perth in Western Australia. And she said, "Oh, apologetically, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I haven't been to church for years and years, but my mother, she's had a whole year, her whole life, she's done the flowers and done the cleaning, and always she's a daily mass goer." And this woman was extolling how extraordinary her mother was in her dedication and apologising for being lapsed. And so we got a conversation going, and I said, well, I tried to get her to think a bit more deeply about what it is about her state, her self assumed status of being lapsed. I said, well, perhaps the Spirit is just calling you beyond the narrowness of where the church is at, and what is it that you're really looking for? And I think she started to become really interested and hear what we were saying about Be the Change, and find that she wasn't alone, and that her Catholic heart was still there, but she wasn't feeling her spirituality affirmed or recognised in the narrow constraints of the church. And so, yeah, it was once again really heartening.
Yeah. I just had to think of when you say about the women not being recognized. When I was a child and I wanted to become an altar server, at that time was not allowed. Girls were not allowed in my parish as altar servers. And then my mother told me, the women have to wait until there are not enough men anymore. Then they take the women. And I thought of a presentation, a radio interview that I did with a Jewish lady who talked about Genesis, and I asked her about the women in the Bible, and especially Genesis. And she said, well, there are hardly any women's names in there, but the women who are named in the Bible, in the Old Testament, they are women who they couldn't get around without naming them. So I think it's really important that what she said, that even in the Old Testament you had crucial women, and they were named, but because they couldn't get around without naming them.
Well, precisely. And I mean, this was the acknowledgement that we got from Bishop Steve Lowe, which was wonderful, to say that he said in his letter of a few paragraphs, but well prepared and thought out, and he said that we used to think of Mary Magdalene as a woman of sin and a malign sort of background and so on, and now we realize that was wrong. She was the one that Christ revealed himself to first at the resurrection, and there were only women left at the foot of the cross and at his death. And now we have recognized Mary Magdalene as the apostle of the apostles. And Bishop Steve himself said, sometimes we can get it so wrong. And so he took our Pink Shoes campaign to heart, And when we'd consulted with him, he kept one of the pairs of shoes, and they stayed on his coffee table with one of the stories, and he used it at his press meetings and so on to just remind his clergy that there's another half to this church, and we need to hear their stories. And I sincerely appreciate that support, that information from him.
So now your shoes are in the Vatican. What about the project? Are you, do you have new shoes, or do you have something else? Or yeah, it was apparently very effective, and there might be others in other countries who might imitate you.
Yes, it has been picked up by a number of other people. The Women's Ordination Conference and people like that through the US. So that last year they did pink shoes on the streets in numerous cities in the US. So at least half a dozen. They had various responses. Sometimes one of them, the parish priest, picked up the shoes and just put them straight in the bin and wanted them removed off the street and nowhere near the church. And others, lots of them were, in general, people in the public were very interested and supportive, and you could engage in conversation. And sometimes it's the traditionalists and those who are still going to church who are most reticent and difficult to engage. But where are we going to now? Well, we as coordinators will meet again in the next couple of days and talk about how we become part of the synodal church, which is what the whole church is being called to do. So we are in transition now, or in the middle of between these two synodal gatherings, last October and again in October 24. The official church will be gathering the same delegates, and in the meantime, we as church are being challenged to how do we become part of a synodal church, a listening church that embraces a much greater diversity, which is such a contrast to the hierarchical clericalist church that has been the model up to now, which is, I think, where Pope Francis is calling us and the Holy Spirit to be. So, so what activities that entails, I don't actually know. We, as Be the Change, already are committed to having our inclusive liturgy online once a month, on the last Saturday of each month at 5 o'clock in the evening. You can go to the website, Be the Change Aotearoa New Zealand, and you can find out when those liturgies are. Email us and you will have the link sent to you for the Zoom meetings. We will have a couple of gatherings in person, mostly in Auckland then, throughout the year. And I guess it's just to celebrate and celebrate liturgy and whatever the event is. What specifically those events will be this year yet, we don't actually know, but we'll work that out. So
I think it's good that you've mentioned a few times Bishop Steve, because it also shows that it's not necessarily the problem is not necessarily with the priests, because sometimes it's the congregation that puts them on a pedestal. And even if the priest tries to be really down to earth and accommodating, they can't, there's a certain limit what they can do.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
sometimes it's the people who are putting them there.
That's true. And I think that's what a real change involves. It's from the grassroots up. And so we feel very committed that we need to be part of that, the church on the ground. We the people are the church. We sing that as a song, and that we are the church. And so we want to live that.
Christina, what is your dream for the future for the church? How would you like to see? So you talked about the synod, but what about the real dream? What would you imagine? You have a granddaughter. What would you expect for your granddaughter in the future?
My dream is for an open and inclusive and welcoming and diverse, embracing diversity church, a community where everyone feels themselves at home, whether they call themselves Catholic or not. They don't feel constrained by saying, well, you have to fit yourself into these certain boxes and be a certain way. No, you are accepted for who you are as a person who you are. And so we embrace the diversity of humanity And as Pope Francis says, everybody should be able to find themselves at home. And I see this as a right down to the level of my own family. I have 5 children. They reflect that whole diversity of themselves, from those who deny that there's any God and declare themselves as atheists and say, well, religion's been the bane of society, and the sooner we get rid of that kind of superstition, the better. Right through to another on the other end, who's a traditionalist Catholic who prefers a Latin Mass and feels like the sooner we get back to what we knew for certain and the truth, as if it was some kind of intransient, set in stone thing. So, and in between, and I have a gay son as well. So I want a church that they can all feel like this is home, they belong, and it has to be broad enough to embrace them all. They are all beautiful people, and I totally respect them. They don't need to change. We need to change to be diverse enough to accept them all as they are.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I hope that it will become true, and that everybody feels respected and feels equal within the church, because it was founded on we're all equal.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
each of us created in the image of God, and and we need to be able to live that and celebrate that.
Yes. Thank you very much for all your work, and for the positive way that you're doing it. You're not you are a very positive person. You are not fighting against something fiercely, but you are doing it in a very positive way and trying to change things and have an understanding of where people are coming from, the way that you approach the people who looked at the shoes. You didn't judge them, which is really wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm very enriched by knowing you and the people that I engage with in every conversation. So
Kia kaha, keep safe, and thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you. Go well.
Aotearoa, peace is calling. In the bonds of love we meet. For the world a new day dawning, and shines a light to greet. We're singing, this is the day when the hope was calling. This is the day when the light did shine. This is the day when the world can sing. Te rangi Marie. Can you hear the cry for the wounds to be healed? Can you hear the call for this light to reveal? Oh, a vision of hope and peace for the tears in